Well, when it comes to grants, if you are a startup business and you haven't started before, you normally have to have been in business for at least a year or two before business grants open up to be available. But otherwise, it really depends on the grant. Sometimes they're offered annually, sometimes it's a special grant, such as the child care grant that was out in New York State recently. I would have to look into like exactly what grants those are and if they do that annually. Yes.
Quick question. So one, just are we doing the live right now for this?
Yes, we are live right now.
Okay, I'm just only asking because I got some feedback that they want to get the access to live, so just putting that out there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but second, for those kind of more macro sources like Wall Street Journal, et cetera, what's your opinion of like different media? So like Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Bible Magazine, Vietnam, like podcasts, like bite-sized snippets
Hmm.
to access that kind of information. Do you have any opinion, feedback, or like where to go to find kind of bite-sized information across those kind of journals and stuff like that?
You mean like an aggregated
Yeah.
kind of website? Well, one of our databases is Factiva, which is a business news aggregator. That tends to be more text-based, though. They don't really have podcasts and whatnot. I know that there are some apps and programs out there that do aggregate news, and you could select it. I don't want to give them free promo by naming them. Or if anybody who's watched YouTube, it's like, check out Ground News. That's a big sponsor. They are also an aggregated news site that kind of gives you a broad view of like different perspectives, because you definitely don't want to just read one. You want to like diversify how much you read, different points of view to get a better picture. Yeah. Okay. Well, since we started a little late, this actually puts us back on time. And we will take 5 minutes, and then I will introduce you to Tracy for our next portion. Okay.
So I have a fun story on ChatGPT. I was teaching at the brewery conference about a month ago, and somebody asked me about
No problem. Hello, everyone. My name is Tracy Jong, and I'm an attorney at Evans Fox, and I am a business attorney. So I do all different areas. So I'm actually also a licensed patent and trademark attorney, and I do a big part of my work is buying and selling businesses, representing a lot of not-for-profits and churches, and I also do a lot in liquor and cannabis licenses. So business startups have been something I've done for almost 30 years. So hopefully they brought me in today so I could answer some questions that you guys might have in general about opening a business or starting something new. So I'll open it up. Does anybody have any particular questions that I might be able to answer? Yes.
Okay, so you say you're attorney for,
Evans Fox, that's the name of the firm that I work with.
okay, and what do you, work
Excuse me?
as a business law, you said?
I do intellectual property law. I do licensing of all different types, mostly liquor and alcohol, but I also do other areas of licensing. I do a lot of buying and selling of businesses and startups and basically representing businesses from cradle to grave. So I do everything from opening them up to closing them down to transferring them to new owners, if they pass them down through a family business, things like that.
Yeah, how long have you been an attorney?
I've been an attorney for almost 30 years.
Okay, so
Yes, I've done, and I do work, actually, I have clients that are all across the globe, and I also have, a big part of my practice is all over the state, so I do a lot of work even in New York City. Because some of the areas that I do are very boutique, and there's not a lot of attorneys that do them, so I do things statewide. I did,
like a business card?
yep, I have a business card and a little handout, some pens right up here. In general. And so the library, what they have is they have a sort of like a legal clinic. And so anybody that has questions on especially things related to intellectual property and business startup questions, if you ask the library, they can set you up and I can, either meet with you, or most people want to do just a video call or a phone call, and I can help answer some questions. So a lot of times what happens is people start out here and they get some research, and the research raises some questions, and so they come to me and I'll help them analyze it and figure out what does all of this data that the library found for me, what does it mean for me? And so I help a lot with that.
Tracy, do you assist with incorporation?
Yep, all day.
So I just know that it's something that I always hear. Can you speak through the nuances between like a DBA, LLC, S Corp, and an entrepreneur that's really just getting into it for the first time, and what they should kind of think about and consider with those options?
Absolutely. And so there's a lot of different ways to do business. One of them is what we call a sole proprietorship. So a sole proprietorship is essentially filing a DBA, and if you're an individual, you file that at the county clerk level. You also, if you're a partnership, you file that at the county clerk level. But just to be clear that there are corporations and LLCs also get DBAs. They are not filed at the county clerk. They're filed at the Division of Corporations. I mention this because I have a lot of people that go file them at the county, then they come see me and I have to unfile what they just did with it, because when they file it at the county level, they're exposing themselves to liability that they didn't realize if they're an LLC or a corporation. So the big difference between operating as a sole proprietor and operating under a business entity is liability. So if you have a small business and you don't have a lot of liability, so for example, maybe I'm drop shipping some products that I bought online. I mean, what the liability that you may have, if you have product liability insurance that covers any claims for that, you probably don't have a ton of liability if it's a home business. So depending on how big your business is, whether or not it makes sense to incorporate, the first thing that I do is I look at how much money you're making in this business to see if it makes sense. If you're making less than $10,000 a year, I'm not so sure it makes sense to complicate it and have a corporation or an LLC. There's nothing wrong with having it, but it might be an expense that you don't get a lot of benefit from with it. But if you operate as a sole proprietor, a DBA, there is no protection. So if anything gets wrong and you get sued in the business, what will happen is they're going to be able to get judgments against you, your house, your bank accounts, your IRAs, all of that. It's all exposed if you operate as a DBA. with it. So essentially, the best way that I can explain a DBA is it's a legal nickname. And so, for example, I have an Aunt Margaret, and she goes by Peggy. So Margaret or Peggy, it's the same person. When I go to shake her hands or I give her a gift, it's the same person. When you're operating as a DBA, all you're doing is filing a legal nickname. You're just saying, my name is Tracy, and I'm now operating as Tracy John Law Firm.
So nobody else can take it, like seeing that a regular person just walking down the street and just make up a name or a business. And then they go inside underneath the rural county or wherever state they may be living in, they won't be able to operate that name.
Maybe.
To have something different because it's already under that state. So if they go to a different state and try to use that, they won't be able to use that same one because it's already used in the state that they.
Not true.
That's always so.
I was to say, definitely not true at all. So understand that filing a DBA gives you what they call common law trademark rights, and it's only within the industry that you're doing business and only within your local market footprint. It is possible for two people in the same state to have the same DBA or business name, and it's absolutely possible for the same business name to be in all 50 states.
It could be the same, but a different person can't use that. They can't
Not in that county.
in that, yeah, in that
But
county.
again, it will, and it also does depend on the industry. So a lot of people think when they file a DBA, they're getting trademark rights. You're not.
Yeah, right.
So essentially, the best way to explain what a DBA is you are telling everybody where to sue you. That is
Don't
the,
be telling people that they can't.
no, what you're telling them is if you want to sue the business name Lori's Paper,
The other paperwork to back it up, because that's the main paperwork that you need to be in business. That's the first one. And then you get other ones to back you up, but it's not telling people where to go sue you, because then why would you get a DBA?
no, but that is exactly the purpose of a DBA. The only purpose of a DBA is so the public knows that if they're out there doing business with Lori's Bookshop and it's a DBA, you wouldn't know who to sue. So the DBA has the address of where to serve you for service of process. So the entire reason that you file a DBA is so people know where to sue you.
So that you can do business as, whatever name that you have put the business as, like have a DBA. Do business as the DBA.
That is correct.
Okay.
So it's like a legal nickname.
Yes.
But it's important to understand that that is the function of it. It's not giving you greater rights in terms of trademark and all of that. You know, so for example, when we talk about a DBA, and you had mentioned that you thought only one person in the state could have it. So here's a couple examples. How many McDonald's and Dunkin' Donuts do you know in New York State? Every one of them has the same DBA.
But they function under different.
No, a DBA is a DBA.
But they function as a franchise, so that's different structure.
But that doesn't matter.
They do.
So can I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
So, just so I understand it,
Mhm.
what you're saying is that a DBA, if I file my DBA at the county level,
Mhm.
which is where I would file my DBA, no one else within that county would be able to use that same name. Sometimes depending on the industry that may change,
Correct.
but for the most part, no one else in that county could file it. However, in the state, so like if I file it, if I have a, like, I have a business called Law Consulting in Onondaga County, someone else in Monroe County could file Law Consulting, and we could both be operating in New York State with the same name. Is that-
That's correct. It happens. It happens.
State, you have to put in where it's filed
But,
for the state.
but also clarifying question. Your DBA, you have to live in the county in which you are operating that DBA?
That is correct. And so that's on an individual basis. But understand, if I'm a corporation, I might be able to file that same DBA in this county,
Within the same county?
even though somebody else has an individual one, because I'm filing in Albany County with the Division of Corporations, which gives me statewide rights.
Okay.
So it's not 100% true that nobody else can have the same DBA. Again, think about McDonald's and Dunkin' Donuts. There's a lot of those in Monroe County, and they're all DBAs. You know, so it's important to understand the function of them and what it is and what rights that you get.
Follow-up question.
Yes.
Outside of the DBA providing a vehicle for people to be able to sue me if
Mhm.
things go wrong, it also, if I'm correct, I'm just asking a question, it also would allow me, for example, to open up a checking account, a business checking account.
Correct.
Right, because I know sometimes unless you have like an entity that is separate with an EIN number. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, so a DBA is not an entity. So when you had just mentioned they won't do it unless you're a separate entity. A DBA is not an entity. It's you. It's you individually, and you can get an EIN for a DBA. Generally, an EIN is for people that are going to have employees. However, even though that's the function of it, I usually suggest that people get a separate EIN even if they don't currently have employees. The reason is you don't want to be giving your social security number around to everybody. And so the EIN, at least there's a little bit more protection, and especially here in Rochester, because surprisingly, Rochester is one of the areas of the country with the most ID theft. Yeah, I learned that because my family works in drug rehab, and that's what they all teach them. It's because it's driving distance from New York City. So they come up, they steal the stuff, and then they come sell it upstate in a place that they can come, sell it all and go back easily. So it's a surprising thing that such a small city has so much ID theft, but Rochester is a top one for that. So knowing that, I usually recommend that people do have a separate EIN, whether you need it or not. It's a good idea. It's free. Why not? It takes 5 or 10 minutes to get online.
So you have to have a DBA or any, could you file an EIN under your own name without having any DBA or anything?
Yeah.
I believe you can. As long as you are employing, essentially it would be operating as a DBA, but you wouldn't need a DBA if it's your name. But yeah, you could get an EIN as a sole proprietor. So a sole proprietor typically does have a DBA, but you don't have to. There are a lot of people that operate straight under their name because they're just like a small consultant, and they just operate personally. A lot of, say doctors or therapists, social workers, a lot of people operate under their own name with it. All right, so we talked a little about a DBA, and so we understand that this is a cheap way to have a business name that you are using, and it's something that you can go ahead and file right at the county clerk. It doesn't cost very much, but you have no legal protection at all if you operate this way. All of your personal assets are at risk. So the reason that we have business entities is you can protect your personal assets, so that if anything goes wrong in the business, creditors come after you. The only thing that they can get are the business assets themselves. Assuming that you haven't committed a crime or negligence and they do something called piercing the corporate veil. In general, the purpose of having an LLC or a corporation is so that the only thing that's at risk is the money you put into the business. So if you had a small business and all your business owned was, a podium and a laptop, if anything happened, that's all creditors could do. They could come get the couple business assets, sell them at an auction, and that's it. You wouldn't have any personal responsibility. So that's generally the biggest reason that people will form an entity, so they can protect their personal assets. This is, especially the case for people that are a little bit older and have a little bit more resources. They have a retirement house, and maybe, a couple cars, a vacation home. We want to protect those from creditors. With it. A lot of young people will operate as a DBA because they're like, well, I don't own anything anyways. I have a used car, have it. It's worth $500 with it. But the more assets you have, the more you're going to want to protect them. So the one thing about opening an entity is it costs money to do, but it's lifetime protection as long as you keep the entity open. So you open it one time, you have the one set of fees with it, and you get protection of your personal assets for as long as the entity is around. So it's a good one-time investment to give you protection. However, we always suggest that you couple that with the appropriate insurance to go with it. So this will protect your personal assets, but if you got sued, you would still have all of the legal bills and damages to pay, and that's why you're going to want to carry insurance too. One of the problems with some small businesses and our startups, they're in an area where the insurance company really doesn't know what to do with you, and they can't offer you insurance because they don't have a policy that covers what you're doing for a living. So once in a while, small businesses have trouble getting their initial insurance because they can't assess risk on you. So in that case, having the corporate entity until you're able to get an insurance carrier that will pick you up is definitely a good idea. You know, so opening a business entity, it's usually a fairly quick thing, and it is something that a lot of people do on their own. There's also law firms can do it, some accountants do it. There are some online legal providers that do it as well. And so forming a corporation is a fairly simple thing. You file articles of incorporation, then essentially that gives you the name, kind of like a shell, and then you go ahead and you put your shareholders, your owners of the entity in place, you put your directors and officers in place, and that's really all it is you need to do. You file for your EIN. You know, opening a corporation is something that can be done in less than an hour, and you do it online. It is super quick with it. Now, filing an LLC is a little bit more complicated. You similarly start with some of those same steps, except LLCs require that you publish in 2 newspapers for 6 consecutive weeks. And then after you file in the newspaper, then you need to collect the affidavits of publication from each of the newspapers, and then you file those with the Division of Corporations and something called a certificate of publication. So, you know, it's relatively similar in opening up, but there's that extra step of publication. And then when you complete publication, you have a second thing that you need to file with the Division of Corporations to complete the process with it. So a lot of people ask, what is the difference between a corporation and LLC? Well, essentially, a corporation will give you all of the protection that we talked about. But you're a corporation, so one of the things I tell everyone, it's a fictional entity. I created it on paper. I had a piece of paper and I said, poof, today I am now Tracy John Law Firm. Well, what is that? It's not a person. It can't do anything, you know. So everything that a corporation does, because it's fictional, pretty much has to be done in writing. So you have to have corporate meeting minutes. You have to have resolutions approving the corporation to do things. If anyone's ever gone and got a bank loan, you'll see that you have to have a resolution approving, signing the contract, and then signing the bank loan documents, all of that. And so a corporation gives you a lot of protection, but there are some what we call formalities that go with it in terms of you need to operate like a corporation with having meeting minutes and resolutions and all of those things. An LLC is a creature that came about sometime in the 1980s. And it's sort of this blend. It's an unincorporated association, but what the law did is it gives you all of the benefits of being a DBA and all of the benefits of being a corporation. So you get the legal protection that you would if you incorporated, but you're allowed to operate as simply as you would if you were a DBA. You don't have to do all those meeting minutes and resolutions and things like that. You don't have to have annual meetings. A lot of times it's still a good idea to do so, but you're not legally required to do so. So one of the big differences between a corporation and LLC is whether or not you're good at keeping paperwork. And people that are not really good with paperwork, we usually suggest an LLC might be better so they don't get themselves in trouble unintentionally. You know, I have a lot of people that come to me with corporations and they've never done their meeting minutes. They've never filed their biennials and never done anything they were supposed to do. They thought when they opened it up on LegalZoom that was it. You know, and then all of a sudden you go into the Division of Corporations and you found they were administratively dissolved 10 years ago. So they've been operating as a business that actually was closed down by the state 10 years ago. And they don't mail you anything and tell you. You'd have to see it on the Division of Corporations website. So for those kind of reasons, we might use an LLC for people that want to operate quite simply. There are other differences between them, and they're a little bit nuanced, but I'll mention 2 of them. A lot of times if you go to get investors, you're going to do venture capital raising, or you're going to get a lot of formal fundraising. They will prefer a C Corp to an LLC. I have a lot of times that I have companies that have been in business for a long time, and they require them to switch from the LLC to a C Corp before they'll fund them. Some banks and some private investors, venture capital groups, things like that, and that's because of their tax elections. If you were an LLC, they can't get their S Corp or whatever, you know, tax advantage they want.
Between those 2,
What's that?
S Corp and C Corp.
To be honest, the only difference is taxes. So there, you know, as far as the law is concerned, we have corporation. You're a corporation there's no such thing actually as an S corp. It's kind of a nomenclature that has been adopted. What it really references is the tax code. And so generally what happens is under Schedule C, or check the parts that deal with taxes for corporations or LLCs, the business files its own tax return and pays taxes. And then the owners, when they get money out of it, they're going to get either a salary or the dividends, the profits out of the business. They're going to file their individual tax return and pay taxes on that. You can see that's double taxation on the same money, especially if it's a one or a two-person entity. So there is another section of the tax code, the subchapter S, that basically says that if you meet certain criteria, you're a small business, less than $1 million, less than a certain number of owners, then you can skip filing the corporate level of tax, and all you have to do is report all of the money on your individual tax return, so you only pay taxes once. So that's what it is. It's a tax election. And how I explain it to people, if you've ever filed your taxes, you 1040, at the top you put your name and address, and there's a box next to it. Individual, married, had a household. That's all this is. S or C is that version, but for the corporation. It's just a tax election. It just says what tax form you file with it. So that's really the only difference between them. The other large difference is with a corporation, even though they don't have to pay tax, they do have to prepare what we call an information return, 1120, and it basically calculates all of the money. And then there's a section that says each owner, what their percentage is, and it says how much each owner is going to report on their individual tax return. So with a corporation, you actually need to prepare the return. You just don't pay taxes at that level. You pay them at the individual level. With an LLC, you can have an election to be disregarded as an entity, and you don't have to file that corporate level tax return. You just put it all on your Schedule C, self-employed income, or small home business, that page. A lot of people know about that page, Schedule C, but they call it a lot of different things. That's really the big difference between them. Is with an S corp, you do have to prepare the tax return. You just don't have to pay the tax. With the LLC, you can skip the return altogether.
So what's the advantages and disadvantages of a S corp?
Double taxation.
That's it?
No, that's it. That's a big thing. The difference between paying around 17% taxes versus 40%. Your aggregate, tax load between state and federal. So certainly if you qualify for that, a lot of people would like that with it. Now, one of the other advantages of LLCs that differs from corporations is that corporations, everybody has to be treated the same. So if you, all shareholders, whatever percentage they own, that is what percentage goes on their taxes. They get the write-offs that the business would have gotten, and they get the profits that the business would have gotten. So if I'm a 10% owner, I get 10% of the income on my tax return, and I get 10% of the expenses for write-offs. An LLC is not a corporation. It's what we call a creature of contract. So I can decide who gets the write-offs and who gets the allocations of income. So LLCs can be good if we have a situation where, say, we have somebody who one person is putting in all the money and somebody else is doing sweat equity. An LLC might be a great option because I can write in the operating agreement that the person who put all the cash in gets the write-off for the cash, rather than giving the write-off to the person that didn't put any money in, because they're going to end up getting a refund on money that wasn't theirs.
That's actually taking me to the payroll and the taxes and stuff like that. So, so the taxes and everything, the payroll and having, say that we have just 5 employees and we have a export. And you have where you have to pay your business, and then you have where you have to pay your employees, and then you have where you have to pay the state. Can you break that down just a little bit more for me? Because I'm a little bit confused.
Okay, so when it comes to payroll taxes, and this will be the same.
Employees or anything, just because I need to try to work on that and make sure
Okay, so-
I'm not checked up.
So the way it works, you know, the first thing to say is if you're an LLC and you're not on payroll, you're going to pay both portions, employer and employee. A lot of people call it the self-employment tax. It's about 15%. And that's because the way that it works for payroll taxes, if you have employees, is that the employee pays half, about 7.65%, I think, and the employer pays the matching half, their 7.65. So that's essentially how it works, is the government says that you owe Social Security tax and you owe certain other taxes. The employer pays half and the employee pays half.
Now, the structure of the business don't really matter in that.
No.
Oh, okay.
The only time it matters really is with respect to you as the owner. Because LLCs actually, you're not supposed to be on payroll unless you elect S-Corp status. So you take your money from the business as a distribution or profits. And since there's nobody employing you, you pay employer and employee portions of the tax. And how you pay it is on your annual income tax. But essentially, after you've been in business for the first year or so, they're going to say, listen, quarterly, you have to pay in an estimate of what it should be. The government doesn't want to wait a whole year for its money, so you're supposed to pay it in quarterly, you know, an estimate on what it is. So the owners may pay the, taxes in terms of self-employment. They will pay them separately, but as far as employees, they're paid, separately. Basically, if you have a payroll company, they usually remit the money, or you can.
Now,
And
where would you come in at if there's a downfall or anything in the payroll part? An employee or the company is in downfall. Like, do you pop in? Can you pop in that area? You know,
I mean, the answer is,
you have to just so the employee doesn't sue or anything, right?
I guess that is a question. It depends on what the issue is. Normally, the person that filed your payroll is the one who's going to be responsible to handle whatever the issue is, the payroll company or your accountant. You know, if it requires lawyers, yes, we can certainly get in, but we usually don't. We're not usually the people who are covered on that because, remember, we're attorneys, we do legal, and the payroll is accounting, and so accountants are the ones that are licensed to do that. So once in a while it does involve attorneys. I've had people that, the businesses got overcharged or they forgot to file a final tax return. They've been out of business 5 years and all of a sudden get a bill for 5 years worth of taxes. And they're like, but I closed that business 5 years ago. Yeah, but they didn't close it correctly. And now they've been accruing taxes. And so I will get involved in dealing with situations like that. But as far as arguing whether you got the right amount or if the payroll was wrong, usually attorneys are not the ones involved in that.
Okay, now I was just speaking to one of the assistants about the BOI. Can you break that down a little bit more for me? Because they just changed it in March 27th, saying that we don't have to, that we would have to pay for our federal.
Okay, so I don't believe there's a cost with filing the BOI. So essentially, there is a federal law there that now says that every business that is in the U.S. is supposed to file a BOI with FinCEN. It's an online filing. You go in, you click the button, just fill out the information. It's very simple information. It's what's the name of the business and its address, and then the next page, who are the owners, what are their names and addresses, social security number, and birth dates, and then upload driver's licenses for all of the people that qualify as principals, on it. So it's a fairly simple filing that is, there's no cost to it. So technically right now, the federal law says that everybody needs to file. We all know that Trump made an announcement, I'm not enforcing it. Well, just as easily as he said, today I'm enforcing it, tomorrow I'm not, and then I am, then I'm not. Our recommendation is the law says file it. Don't go with the political whim of, today we're not going to enforce it because they can start to enforce it at any time. So take the 10 minutes and go in and file it. It's not very difficult at all with it. And so, but the enforcement essentially, the Trump administration has said that they only will enforce it against foreign companies doing business in the U.S. if you have owners that are non-U.S. citizens with it. But technically, it is for all businesses that are in the U.S. There are some exemptions, but for the most part, all small businesses should need to file that. Like I said, it's a one and done kind of thing.
Yeah, you just say that that's only one time thing, but have to worry about it.
Well, I mean, if you make a change in the business, you do need to update it. You know, within 30 days, you know, if you change the address, if you get married and change your name, you know, certain other things, you know, but in general, you're filing at once. A lot of people are not making a lot of, you know, changes in their business with it. Whether or not that law will eventually be overturned, I don't know the answer to that. But also understand New York State has a similar law for LLCs. I don't know why they passed it for LLCs only and not corporations, but New York has a rule that you need to file something similar to a BOI with the New York Division of Corporations. So right now that's been halted another year, you know, with it, but currently there are rules saying that the state does it as well. And I think what they were attempting to do is they didn't want people hiding behind government or behind entities. If you're out there doing business, we need to know who the human beings are behind the business. We need to make sure.
I'm sorry, can you finish that before you cut it?
No, because,
No, I'm sorry, excuse me. I just wanted to help information to me. Can you just let her finish quickly and then jump in? No, I'm just doing it. Is that okay? Thank you, appreciate it.
So essentially what the law is about is we don't want people hiding behind corporate entities where we don't actually know the human beings behind it or where the money is coming from. And so at one point, what we were really going after is
I just want to stop because the fact that it's on my mind right now. So the fact that, you know, the government and everything, they want for people to start their own business. But then at the same time, what is the problem where, you know, they come after people and they funding it and making their money and stuff like that on their own
I can't
job.
answer political questions. Yeah,
I mean,
that's
but
politics.
it's still concerning for all the businesses. Like you have to concern it yourself about it.
No.
Like to wonder why. Like,
No.
If they want for everybody to be in their own business and have their own fund and stuff like that, what is, you know, because money is not this. We're not ever running out of money. They can run out of money, but we're really not running out of money. It's all to make more money. But why is they making it as though like, you know, they have to put all these structures and limitations to people that start their own business? Like it don't really. I guess
Again,
that's what
you can start a business as a DBA or as an individual. You do not need to be an LLC or a corporation. The government offers that as an option to you. If you would like personal liability to be relieved, you can do this. So they're offering options. That's it. You don't have to choose those options. You can go out and do business individually. That's absolutely fine. There's no problem with doing
But
that.
then you just said that the government, they don't like the fact that, you know, people is filing or making their taxes and stuff like that. And, like, you go back to the stuff.
Okay, so what the regulations with FinCEN, what we're really worried about is where the money is coming from. So the original concern several years ago were more terrorists, and they didn't want drug cartel money coming into the U.S., and they didn't want people from other countries simply opening up a U.S. business and funneling all the illegal money into the U.S. So the original point was to detect that. You know, since then, there have been more concerns because we have more and more foreign investment, especially coming from the Middle East, a lot of the petroleum money. We have a lot of investment, you know, again, coming from some countries with drug cartels, you know, with it. But also there's been a lot of investment from China. And so because of so much foreign investment in the U.S., now they say, listen, we want to know who's behind corporations. We don't want them to be anonymous. We need to know where the money in the U.S. is coming from so that we can make sure that illegal money is not getting into the U.S. So that is why it is FinCEN that does it, the federal government, the Treasury. What they're looking for is illegal money coming into the U.S.
But that shouldn't, like, damage or bother everybody that's in business. That
It does. Hey, we have to have a rule. All business owners are not.
The law should only affect people that they actually, get caught and actually in that business.
How do we catch them if we haven't been doing the tracking? We're not going to separate out and say, you have to file and you don't. We're saying all businesses or no businesses. We're not allowed to discriminate and pick between them.
So now, it might be discriminatory.
Well, see,
Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me. I'm
I
sorry.
know, but I know.
Okay, but I can't let this be monopolized. Do you mind let him finish his question? Because I have, instead of
Also,
talking.
sorry, Tracy, I don't mind, I can moderate because we actually, were part of, supporting this event. So if you don't mind, what I'll do is moving forward, if we could just raise our hands to ask questions, just so we can give everybody the opportunity to ask them to start, and I can just call them host. That's kind of what host we running today. I was trying to also run it, so is that okay, everybody?
Yeah, I think it would be good that we can all understand and benefit from what is being presented.
Yeah, I'm just asking the attorney question.
So I just want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to have that input. I think your question is great. I just want to be able to just support the process of asking questions. So moving forward, if we just raise our hands and I'll just call them folks and answer. Is that okay with everybody? If not, then it's good. Is that okay?
Thank you.
All right, just want to make sure. Sorry, continue with your question.
So, I think, if I understood your question, it was, why should I, as an American citizen, have to file anything with anybody unless I've gotten in trouble? The problem is, we can't track anything if you haven't had to register. So that's the point of it. You have to put your name in. This company, I'm the human being behind it. So when the Treasury looks at the bank accounts and they see the money, they know whose money it is. If you don't register, how do I know whose money it is? It's a company. It could be located anywhere in the U.S., any one of the 50 states.
Now, okay, so what do they do with that? And do they keep it to the side for that person that nobody could actually steal it?
I'm not the federal government. You're asking me questions you need to direct to the federal government.
You're an attorney, but so
I don't know what FinCEN does. It's not to us. It is a government regulatory agency, and they require the information. I cannot say what they do with it in enforcement.
But don't you think you should, just in case you want to use that business and then you have an employee that, may need that help from you?
No.
Or something like that?
It would be the same as asking me, why do I not get the information from the Secret Service? Why don't I get the information from the CIA or FBI? So you're telling me that that the entire country should have free access to certain government information? No, because you would be getting so that information is everybody's driver's license, birth certificate, and social security number of every single owner nobody should have access to that, only the government.
No.
You have a question?
Hi, my name is Jarvis Braxel. I'm a clinical scientist and public health consultant, and I have an LLC, but as you were explaining about smaller entrepreneurs, I was first told to not get the DBA because the LLC might protect me more, and that I should look to getting an S Corp and the C Corp and those things. We might have been looking to get to those things, but for a baby who just
Now, do you already have LLC?
Yes.
So you have it. So you have protection against personal liability. And at the end of the day, whether you are a corporation or an LLC, both of those are going to give you that protection. So since you already have that, I think you're good.
pursue an S Corp.
No, S Corp is just a tax election. And if it makes sense, talk to whoever does your taxes. It's a simple form you file if you want to elect that. So, but understand, if you can elect that tax status without being a corporation. So that's why I say there really is no such thing as an S Corp. It's really a tax status. And LLCs can also elect that tax status. So it gets confusing because you tell people, I'm an LLC, that's an S Corp. And people go, what? So with it. So if you decide that you're going to do it, if you're an individual consultant, I don't think it makes sense because the only reason would be to avoid you have the self-employment tax of 15%. If you became an S Corp, you can expense out 7.65% of it as an expense because it would be a write-off on the taxes.
7.65% of the
Yes, because you know how employer pays half an employee?
Yeah.
So if you became an S corp, you could go on payroll and you could have the company pay half of the taxes and then half of it come out of your personal paycheck. So then you can write it off at the end of the day. So that's why some people do it. But if you're a single member business, it's all your money anyways. I'm not really sure you're saving a ton with it. You know, talk to your tax person, he can run the numbers. You know, but essentially you're gonna pay it whether you pay it through as an employer or just on self-employment tax, you're gonna pay the same 15%.
Okay, thanks. It's really good. Please, appreciate it.
All right.
Okay, now I wanna jump to trademarking. Okay, so, trademarking and having your business protected, it's just the product having to protect or just the whole business itself.
No, so a trademark is a brand or anything that somebody uses to recognize your business as the products or services are coming directly from you. So it can be your business name, it can be a trade name, it can be a logo, you know, it can be all sorts of things. In fact, it could be a color, a sound, the look of the store, you know, it can be a lot of things. Typically, we're thinking of business names. So a trademark, if you get that, you get it with respect to the particular goods and services that you are offering.
Now, we're gonna trademark things, I can have to do with
Okay.
intellectual property.
I don't know if you want me to finish the first answer before I jump into the second.
Yes, I would like to.
You know, so intellectual property, trademark is a kind of intellectual property. They're the same thing. There's 4 kinds of intellectual property. Trade secrets, you have patents, you have copyright, and you have trademark. So intellectual property is a category, trademark is one of them. So it is a type of IP. I'm with it. So with branding, when you get a trademark, you get it with respect to the goods and services that you're actually doing. So for example, if she has a consulting business, she would get protection within the category of consulting. However, you wouldn't get protection on, say, t-shirts or coffee mugs or TV shows. You only get protection on the industry that you're in with it. So, you know, it's important to understand how it fits in to everything. A lot of people think if I get a trademark, I can stop everyone else in the entire country from using that name. No, only people that are direct competitors in your business industry.
Now, say that you have like multiple businesses that,
Then you can file in multiple categories.
yeah, and same thing, and then you have your intellectual property that you use in your business and stuff like that. So how can your intellectual property that you have don't fight against the next person's intellectual property and protect it so that they don't sue you in that area? Or,
I'm sorry, I don't actually understand the question.
okay, hold on, back to that. I'm getting myself. Okay. So you know how McDonald's, they have intellectual property and they use it for their and stuff like that. Okay, now, my business or, say, Wendy's, and they don't have really intellectual properties. They really battle up with their intellectual properties and stuff like that.
I guess I'm not understanding why you're making the assumption they don't have intellectual property. I would say every single business that exists has intellectual property automatically.
Can you, I'm so sorry, Christy, to interrupt. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Can you define what intellectual property is?
Intellectual property is patents, copyrights, trademarks, and trade secrets. So anything that you do in your business that's not generally available to the public is something that is protectable under state law for unfair competition and under some of the federal laws that are out there as well. So if you come to the library and they do some research for you and they help you come up with your business plan, that business plan is intellectual property. That isn't generally available. It's a lot of information that you aggregated and put together. You have a list of customers. You have a list of suppliers that you do business with. Those lists are intellectual property. You know, so that some of them fall under what we call trade secrets, but almost everybody that's in business has intellectual property of some sort.
Okay, so that's what I was saying, okay. So, now, like McDonald's, and they have their intellectual property brands
Yes, you can. Absolutely. It's one of the most lucrative areas of law. Is suing people for intellectual property, patent and trademark infringement. You absolutely can. That's the only reason that you register a trademark or a copyright is for the purpose of having the privilege of suing people who are infringing on you. And same with trade secrets. Where we usually see the trade secret litigation is one of your employees left and started to use your information at a competitor. Or they left and opened their own business and tried to take some of your customers with them, or they took your ideas.
I just wanted to say that I'm interested in learning what else that you have prepared for us today. And I don't have much time because I have to return back to school.
No, absolutely. So
Yeah, sorry.
essentially, I am here to answer questions. So I did put together, no, that's okay. I did put together a little handout if you want to grab. It has a summary of a lot of these issues because of the things I get asked the most often. However, I'm here to answer questions in general that you guys have about intellectual property, opening businesses, a lot of these different topics. You know, hopefully I can give you a little bit of guidance on. You know, so are there some particular, I know you had some questions about your entity. So it sounds like you did the right thing. You protected your personal assets, you have your LLC, and if you decided that you wanted to have more than one business line, you could have more than one business under that LLC.
So I could be Wilhelmina Health Solution, that's the name of my business, as a public health consultant or patient advocate that's contracted, and I could have another entity of that business or a separate business that is linked to what I do, service and nonprofit organizations like grant writing.
You absolutely can. So
program
there's one
evaluation.
caveat though. The only time this doesn't happen is if the LLC that you opened is what we call a PLLC. That means that you have a license. So if you are like a licensed doctor, that business can only do medical. Like a licensed lawyer, we can only do legal. So, but a regular LLC, yes, I have a lot of people that have one LLC and they have multiple businesses and we do them by DBA. So what happens is they have one online business. I have one person that sells decals. He figured out a really cheap, easy way to get decals for people that are fixing up old cars. And so he has one business, it's online and it has a DBA for a decal. They also sell mugs and t-shirts and a bunch of other things at festivals. You know, so they have one business name that does that. So your LLC that you have, you can get DBAs for it, and that way you can operate many different things all under the same business. Now, whether you want to do that or not, that depends on how risky each of the businesses are. So what you wouldn't want to do is take a really risky business and put it in with a really safe business that I might get sued, you know, in this other one. But the things that you're doing is individual. There wouldn't necessarily be a reason to have multiple LLCs. Why have to get 3 sets of insurance? Have to file 3 different tax returns, get 3 separate payrolls, one for each line of business. So that's one of the things that, you know, we do. I know a lot of people wonder, they have all of these online providers, and the difference is they're not allowed to give legal advice. They will file whatever you ask of them. However, half of the time what they file is wrong, and that's the difference with going to a private attorney is we're going to explore what are you trying to accomplish and does it make sense. So one of the topics that I do get asked a lot is, should I be a New York entity or should I open up in Delaware or Florida or Nevada is one that comes up a lot, Wisconsin. And the reason is some of these states don't have income tax. Some of them, they have laws that protect the identity of the owners. So there's a lot of different reasons. People read some article online, ooh, I want to open up in another company, in another state. Sometimes that works, but it really has to do with, if you have a brick and mortar location in New York, and you're doing business in New York, you're paying taxes in New York. Even if you're a company outside of the state, you still have to also come get registered as an entity doing business in New York. So you're basically paying incorporation costs twice. You now have to file tax returns in both states. You now have to pay for a registered agent service in the other states because you're not living there. So sometimes people think that the opening up in another state is a great benefit, but for most people that are small businesses, it's just duplicating your costs. You know, the only time that it might make sense is if you have a business that has no brick and mortar location. And so I have some people that do, say, drop shipping type things. Okay, they might open up in another state. They don't have a brick and mortar location that looks like they're doing business in New York, so they're probably not going to get hit up with New York taxes. So then it does make sense in that case to open your entity in one of the states that doesn't have income tax with it. But to be honest, if you have other things, you're probably still filing something in New York anyways because you live here.
This might be I have a question for you. What makes a home business different from having a actual, brick and mortar business? Like you have all the structure and everything at home, and business is the neighbor.
There's no difference in legal. It's the same. The difference mostly has to do with some of the tax rules with it. And it's mostly to do with either income tax or sales tax. But a lot of people, like for example, she's doing consulting. Her consulting doesn't have sales tax consequence, so it doesn't matter. But there are some people that they want to get out of having to collect and remit sales tax. So if they're a home business and they don't have a store open to the public, then they might be able to operate as if they're operating out of another state. Typically, their dropship company is in that other state with it. And so those are some of it. But you're a legal business wherever you're located. Whether it's a home business or you rent a place, it doesn't matter. It's all the same.
If you provide professional services such as consulting in multiple state entities, and you have, say, a DBA, you only have a DBA right in your county, what are the tax implications or legal implications that you might have to be aware of in that situation?
All right, so that's a tough one, and I'm not supposed to answer questions on taxes because I'm a licensed attorney, not a licensed CPA.
Yeah, gotcha.
However, in general, you're going to have to pay taxes where you earn the money. So where the issue is if you're operating from one place, where did you do business? And so a lot of times, like if I write a contract, if there's two people doing business in two different states, there's usually a sentence. It's that stuff that you guys overlook, that the pro forma part of it that no one reads. That's where it says, this is under the laws of X state. That's going to tell you where you're going to have your tax consequence because you're sort of claiming that's where I'm doing business, with it. So those are games that attorneys and accountants play in order to take advantage of better tax pictures in other places with it. But if somebody hired you in Virginia and you're here giving advice by telephone, you're probably just doing business here. But if you rent an office, there, or depending, there are certain types of business that you do that you're required to be registered in that other state, then you're definitely going to pay taxes in that other state. But as a consultant, if you're doing it from home, you're generally only having one office. You just pick where it is, and that's where all your business runs out of.
Since we're speaking about places and where we're doing business, I just actually got an email from this address where my business is, that they're changing the address there. Is there, I don't know if rules is the word, or is there advice of having my home address be my business address? I'm pretty apprehensive about it, but I really don't know.
I will tell you that's a little bit more of a personal decision. And so a lot of people will say, like for me, I'm an attorney. So there are, and I told you, I do a lot of things in cannabis and drug and alcohol related and, things that, well, maybe I don't really want them knowing where I live because I have 3 children. However, and so some people, because of the nature of the business that they do want to seal or kind of protect as much as they can their home address. But with that said, these days, it's almost impossible. Your address is out there somewhere online and somebody's going to find it, so I'm not so sure what you're accomplishing with it. And remember, when you file your DBA, you have an address on there. When you file your taxes, your address is on there. You know what I mean? So it's not as anonymous.
So when I filed my LLC, it was with that.
The registered agent.
Yes.
And so that's something that a lot of people do, and they just forward you the mail that they get it.
Right.
So you can do that.
So I could just have well, they're moving on, or they're changing, they said my address is changing, so that means I will, like you mentioned earlier, I learned that I'll have to now change a lot of things on my business.
Yes.
Things, so it might just be easier if I do from my home address, but I didn't know.
Well, you don't have to pay the registered agent service
Right.
every year.
That's what I'm saying.
The only thing that the registered agent service does is serve as a mailbox address.
Right.
All they do is, you mail, any legal mail that goes to them, they just forward it to you. So if you live in the state already, just get the mail sent to you, save the $200 a year. Usually the way the registered agent service is, they offer it for free for the first year, and then they take your credit card and you just get billed for it, and you don't even remember that it's there. And you just keep paying a couple $100 a year for it. But if you're a small business, it's money you can save. Absolutely.
Just building off of that point, I know some businesses also use a PO box, but then there are, that in some cases you guys protect your home address. But then I'm also aware that when you use a PO box, it might limit you from engaging with certain local government, state, federal opportunities. Can you speak on that a little bit?
So a lot of legal filings do require an actual address. You can have a mailing address, it's a PO box, but a lot of things you have to actually have a physical address on the application itself, even if you have a PO box. The biggest thing with the PO box is that you can only have the post office delivered to you. So you're not going to be using FedEx or UPS or any of those, and that can be a little bit on the difficult side. The government in general, I don't know that they would deny doing business with you, but most of them, their requirements are they need a physical address for the person with it. Because otherwise, again, we're running into that area where people can anonymously open up a business, illegally take a bunch of government money and then disappear. That's why we need to have an address so we can actually track what's happening. So that's really, mostly what it's about with it. So, but we usually do offer the option of having the actual address, but a separate mailing address that's a PO box. And then the mailing address is the only one that they make public. What's that? Well, it certainly is. You're seeing a lot of the lawsuits come out with PPP money. People that just got away with EIDL and PPP money. And they took tons of it and did all sorts of things, doing exactly these things, using a PO box, opening a company and not saying who was behind it. And so the government has gotten smarter and said, hey, we're closing this loophole. That's now why we have the DOI reporting. And again, it's just so they know who is behind the business. That's it. All you're doing is telling them the owners of the business. That's it. Yes.
I see you have listed here that you have some knowledge on MWBE. I need to be looking to acquire that status, obviously. I guess just go because I really have no, I think it takes some years.
You usually, yeah, so there's a number of different ways to get certified. There is one with the state with it. You have to be in business a year, usually before you do it. And it's a pretty long and extensive process to get certified. And there are some certifications that you actually pay about $3,000 for, and you have to renew it and pay $3,000 every single year. So people ask me, why don't I have that status even though I filed for it for other people? Because it's not really going to benefit me. It benefits you, I guess, in two ways. If you are in an industry where people really want to support a minority business, it's great advertising to say I'm a female-owned business. If that is part of your marketing and part of what sets you apart. For me as a lawyer, I don't think it matters. People don't care whether you're male or female as much, so it doesn't benefit me. The other thing is, if you do get money from a government agency or a quasi-governmental agency, there are a lot of rules that governments have to give a certain percentage of their contracts to people that have a minority status. So we did that to kind of level the playing field, because we found that the big guys that are in business a long time, they're the ones that know the system and how to get the contract. So what we wanted to do is level the playing field so that the small guy has an opportunity to get some of those as well. So they set aside a certain percentage of them that have to be given to somebody with a various status with it. And if you are in an industry where you might be getting business from one of those agencies, it probably will help you because it may give you a leg up in terms of being able to get a contract. So it's not saying that, listen, I'm going to get it just because I have this status. It's just saying that out of the contracts, I have a better shot. If they're going to give out a whole bunch of them, some of them have to go to a category that I'm in. And since there's fewer of us in this category, I have an enhanced chance to be able to get one of those licenses or one of those things. You know, so with what you're doing with public health, I would say there's a lot of grant stuff out there that it would help. I have a lot of clients that are like restaurants and bars, and I'm like, unless you're catering for the government, you know, like municipalities, fire department, something like that, I'm not so sure it's going to help you a ton. But with what you're doing, yes, it will. And you can go, if you go online, there's a pretty good website on what you have to do to qualify and the forms that you fill out, and you can get certified by the state. I would go to that one before one of the private agencies and go through that process first. Again, it's a little bit of a long process because what they're trying to do is make sure that you're legitimate. So they look at your business. Now, you're only one person. It should be a lot easier. But what they're afraid of is that the business is really run by one person, but you put it in the minority person's name. And so they're going to suss that out in the process. They will talk to your vendors. They will look at your bills. They look at who signed your contract, who signs your checks, who's making the decisions in your business. They are going to look to see that at least the 51% owner of it is actually the one operating the business. There, you know, a lot of people that try to do it, like a husband that'll put a construction business in his wife's name to qualify, and then when they go to talk to her, she doesn't know the first thing about how to bid on a contract. She doesn't even know what a hammer is or how to use it. I mean, they're going to suss that out. You know, so it is a fairly invasive process. They ask a lot of information to make sure that people are legitimately qualifying that with it. Obviously, we all know there are people that know how to play the game and get through that shouldn't. You know, but the process is set up that they will look at your first year of business and how you conducted business and see, you know, if the minority person really is a decision maker in this business. If they are, then they certify you. And then they'll check, you have to get recertified as well, so you'll have to keep sending them information. But it's, you know, if you get a lot of government work, it's probably worth the trouble doing. You know, but I do tell everyone, do plan it's going to be a good 6 or 8 hours of collecting the paperwork that they're asking for. You know, because you feel like they're asking for everything except for what you ate for breakfast this morning. You know, it does feel a little bit invasive. Because you're like, why am I giving all this information to the government? You know, but unfortunately, you're asking for a benefit. It's not a right. It's a privilege. So you have to qualify, and they're allowed to investigate that. And if you don't want to give that information, don't ask for the privilege.
Thank you.
You are welcome. Like I said, it's a pretty decent online resource. Not everything from the government is good, but some of the agencies have rebuilt their websites in the last few years, and they're really quite good. You can learn everything you need to know, get copies of the forms, everything. They're right available online for that status. And then this also is one of those things that the library has me help people with. Not, you know, you have to do it yourself, but I am there to be a guide to answer questions. A lot of times you get a checklist, and you don't even know what 5 of the documents that they're asking for. You're like, articles of incorporation, what's that? You know, I need a certificate of assumed name, what's that? You know, so that's where I come in and I'll help you either file what you need, or a lot of times, honestly, people just have a big book that they got because they want a LegalZoom and opens it up. They just put all their papers and put them in, and I just walk through and help sort out what they have and what it is they're asking for with it. So, but if you decide that you want to apply for that, that is one of those things that you can take a stab at it, and you can talk to the library.
You said call you.
Yep, go through the library. They're the ones that they decide who I can speak to, and I don't mean that they say no to anybody. What I mean is they have a grant, so they have to keep track of where the money is going. So you have to go through them to get to me. And so you just, I'll let them know what you need, and then she sends an email over to me, and with your phone number, email, what it's about, and then I just reach out to you, and we set up a time, and if you want a phone call, a video, in-person meeting, whatever it is, and I will certainly assist you with it.
Okay, so that was my next question, because you can't afford all of your experiences. If you're so I'm hearing that this library, I can contact the library and be in contact with you and benefit from your service free to me, but out of a grant.
Absolutely.
Is there any caps on how many sessions or?
That is completely up to the library. So they do have a very limited amount of funds, so they have to spread it out. We can't spend it all on one person. We have to benefit in hundreds, if we can within a given year with it. But there are some periods where they go a whole month or more and nobody asks for any help. So the next month I'm able to do 2 or 3 sessions with one person because there's, they kind of allocate, over the year, with it. So it really is up to them with, how they're going to allocate the money out. But as far as I know, I don't think they've ever said no to anybody. They have enough funding to meet the needs of the people that come in. But this is like one of the programs that they do. So you hear, we have a library that, yes, it has information, but they also have a lot of resources that they put on, and they have grants between the city and the state and other private places where they have allocated money to kind of assist entrepreneurs. You have this entrepreneurial center. They run sessions on cannabis. They run sessions on patent and trademark. They run sessions like this. And all of that, that's all the library. It's all of your tax money putting all this stuff on. And so one of the things I would suggest is if you have needs as a business owner, come in and talk to them and find out all the resources that they have, because Rochester has more than you will realize. And Rochester is one of the federal depository libraries. You have access to something here that only a handful of places in the entire country have. And these librarians are specially trained by the federal government on patent and trademark research. So they can get into the same exact things that the federal government employees can get into. I can't. I can use IP.com, and some of the private things that are out there, but some of the resources that they have are tremendous, and they can get into things. They also, help you. You heard her mention SCORE. Have you ever heard of SCORE? So SCORE is a group, I always tell everyone, I only remember the last 2 retired executives, but essentially SCORE is a group of business people that have been around for a long time, very experienced. They're retirees from Kodak and Xerox and all sorts of companies, and they believe in helping small business owners. So they volunteer their time and they mentor you. And they don't have a limit on the amount of time or anything that they put in. The limit is on what that person knows. But SCORE has a lot of people with a lot of different expertise, and they will help you. They help write up business plans. They help put things together, all of that, and it is entirely free. And the library, I don't know if they still do, but for a while, a lot of these groups were able to function because the library let them use meeting rooms here to have their monthly meetings because it was central, and then all the business owners could get to them, and it was like a place to be with it. So, they may not have all of those resources, at the moment, but the library here does house some groups that are helpful to entrepreneurs with it. So they're kind of small things that you think it's not anything, but some of these groups have really launched quite a few businesses, and they're networking groups. They have one that deals with intellectual property and patents, and it's a group for inventors, people that invented things. And the last I knew, they met here at the library, and these people help each other. They're like, oh, you need this, go here. You need this, go here. They're kind of their own little group, and they share information, and that's a huge benefit. Not only is it free, but it's legitimate. Nobody has anything to gain. They're just all trying to help each other, in business.
Oh, thanks.
So there's that. There also is, she mentioned the small business development. That is at a couple of, I think the colleges have some of those. I don't work as much with them. I prefer a little bit more SCORE with it, but they're all good resources, and I know that small business development can help run business plans and help you sometimes locate funding sources. So it's not entirely their mission, but I've had a lot of people use them for some of those things. So again, all free, and if you come here to the library, that's part of what they do is connect you to other resources in the community that you didn't even know existed. I tell people, I lived here most of my life, and half of these things I didn't even know existed. I was like, wow, you know, Rochester really has a lot. In the library here, the people that run the business section, they have gone out of their way to take this government library and make it accessible to private people, trying to help you more than just getting a library book. They're trying to help you in business, and so they have a lot of resources at their hand. A lot of paid services that if you come to me, I have to pay online to access those databases. They have a subscription, and they can access it for you, and it doesn't cost you anything. Where if you come to me, I have to pass the cost on to you. All right. What other questions can I answer for you guys today?
Mostly everything.
Probably. Like I said, it was just, those are just questions that I'm asked very often, and so, one of the, a couple of the questions, should I incorporate? Again, I'm back at how risky is your business and how much money do you make? If you're only making $10,000 a year, you're not spending $2,000 protecting. Wait until you're making a decent amount of money before you worry about incorporating. The only exception to that is if you're in a exceedingly high-risk business and you might get sued a lot. Then of course, you want to be protected.
I want to give out that thing. And make sure the business and everything is.
And the other thing to realize is incorporating, filing trademarks, all of those things are investments in your business. They all are also expenses of your business if you do a tax write-off. So a lot of people are like, well, that's expensive, but it's a little bit like some of the other things. You're going to either pay it in income tax or you're going to pay it to benefit yourself with it. So a lot of these things are investments in your business, and they will help it grow and they'll help protect it. But also it gives you something that you can pass on later. That's there. So a lot of people have a business, and if you're a DBA, it's not easy to bring in a new owner. If you're a corporation or an LLC, it's easy to change owners, with it. So a lot of people, if you have a business that you might want to grow it and add more people to it, having a business entity is a good idea because now you already have an EIN. If you're operating as a DBA, if you bring in another owner, you need a new EIN because that one was attached to you personally. Now if you're going to do a partnership or do business with somebody else, that means you need a new EIN, new contracts, new bank accounts. You have to start everything all over again. So having an entity, it is a stable way of doing business where you can change ownership over time. And maintain all your accounts stay in place. Yes.
It was floated to me the idea to work to be contracted by law firms for like medical malpractice. Like I would be looking at medical records and things like that. How do you go about doing that? And do I need to be an LLP?
You do not. You only, the PLLC is only if your profession itself is licensed. And so there's a list of them at the state. What you're doing doesn't require it. Now, I have a girlfriend that's going to do something like that. She's a nurse. She does have to be a PLLC.
Right. So that's what I'm in the space where I can be licensed, but my education trumps the licensure. So I can.
A lot of it depends on the services that you're offering.
Right, so I was thinking that if I was offering a medical,
But it's not, because you're not actually practicing medicine.
Okay.
You're reading documents and interpreting them
Okay, perfect.
with it. And how you would get into that, you're going to contact the Bar Association, and you're going to go by one of the directories of all the law firms, and you're going to invite them and talk to them. Find out all the ones that do medical malpractice, and or do things like that. And don't limit it to med-mal. I would, suggest that all personal injury needs it. I can tell you my mother's best friend did this for a lot of years, and when I worked in New York City, I was an attorney down there for almost 10 years, and I used services every day that did that. There was a company and it had 4 or 5 nurses, and all they did is collect medical records, read them and summarize them for us, so we could go in and do depositions. I did my malpractice stuff back then. On personal injury, I don't do that type of work. My firm does. I don't personally do those anymore. But it's definitely a very valuable service that is out there, and it's something that will save a law firm a lot of time.
Now, you say you had a firm.
I did. I had a law firm, and I merged with Evans Fox about 2 years ago.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your time and your perspective.
Have a great day. So it's a great service to get out there. What I can tell you is you may have a little bit of educating, because I don't find that the attorneys up here use that service as much because it's not well known. Where like down in New York City, everybody used one of those companies, because they were a well-known thing. But up here, there's not a lot of people that do it. So a lot of law firms might be suspect going, you're doing this? Are you qualified? So you may have to, offer to do one for free or something so they can test you out, or something like that. But definitely it is a great service that's in there, because reading through medical records, for us, it's horrible. I can tell you, I'm an attorney and I know a lot of things, but every time I have to read medical records, there are all these acronyms and I have no idea what they mean. And, you're able to do that and to be able to, highlight. Out of these 100 pages, the one page that talks about the injury is right here. Then the attorney doesn't have to read 100 pages. They only have to read the one page that has it. So it is a super valuable service. And if you can grow it, you probably make a ton of money with it. So like I said, my mom's friend did it. She just moved to Florida and retired. That's why she doesn't do it anymore. But she did it to supplement her income as a single mother with it. And she did fabulous in it for like 20 years. She was a regular nurse at what used to be Park Ridge, now it's Unity, with it. So it definitely, you can get it out there. It's getting the first few people, and then once you get the first few and people know you're good, you'll have more work than you know what to do with, and you're going to probably have to find other people to work with you.
And that's the blessing of growth, right?
Yep.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for your time and your patience.
You're welcome. So any other questions anybody has?
Last question for you.
Yeah.
Whether you're a DBA or an LLC, you speak about growth and maybe getting to a point to where you don't have team members, but you have to work with subcontractors. Is there a favorable legal entity for working with that?
It's only when you're going to get investors or that, and a lot of that has to do with tax status, because they want to get a certain tax status, and an LLC disqualifies them, so they want you to be a C Corp with it. So really, that is a big piece of it. The other thing is the way that they work is, remember we said that the money, the way it goes in a corporation, they want it to filter through in a way that they're only paying on their taxes. Because when you have sometimes a company, you might have a millionaire where his effective tax rate might be 50%. Then you have me, this little old person that makes no money, my tax rate might be 10%. So they want to have the C Corp so that everyone can file at their own tax rate. They don't want to be paying at a higher rate than they ought to, with it. So, those are some of the background reasons why. Historically, some of the other reasons are the laws are still much more settled for corporations than they are for LLCs. A lot of what we do as attorneys, it seems like magic. It's not really. What happens is we have laws, we have forms, and like especially in New York, we have a lot of businesses and a lot of lawsuits. So things have gone to court. We know exactly how they're going to work out and how they're going to be interpreted by the court when they get there, because we have cases that say that. LLCs are new. We don't always know how they're going to be treated, because remember I told you it was this mixture between corporation and sole proprietor. So in in some areas of the law, they treat you like a sole proprietor. In some areas, they treat you like a corporation. So if you're in a high-risk business area, we want the certainty of knowing you're getting that protection, so we'd rather you be a corporation than an LLC. But again, those are very high-risk business areas, not what most small entrepreneurs are getting into. You know, so a high-risk business might be an amusement park, extreme sports, I don't know, things involving drugs perhaps. You know, say that you're doing something where you're doing therapy with mushrooms. You know, so a lot of people are doing that, you know, but we don't know what the experience the person is going to have. You know, that could be high risk. Somebody could come back and have a bad interaction. You know, there's not a lot of data out there for some of those things. So those might be examples of high risk businesses, but most of what the rest of us are doing is just fine. You know, but that is one of the first things I do is ask, what are you going to do with this business? And if it's high risk, we're going to be talking about a corporation, not an LLC.
Thank you so much.
You guys are welcome. You know, and I know you guys are with the organization, and one of the things, you know, that I share with people, you know, it's, I find that I'm a little bit like the library, one of those secrets that nobody knows that we're out there. You know, it's harder because now I'm with a firm, but I've been out here for a long time, and it's like, you know, I have a ton of experience that's out there, and one of the things that I like to do is help small business owners. I was one. You know, my husband still is one. Most people I know are doing that. You know, so I tell everyone, if you need somebody to come in and help or be a resource, you know, offer some session, you know, I am happy to do that. You know, I do tell everyone, you know, as an attorney, we spend a lot of hours behind a computer. I'm a people person. I would much rather come out once in a while and meet business owners and actually feel like I'm making a difference. You know, so I know some attorneys don't like to do that. Very different than Awesome. You know, very different than me. You know, I'm out there, literally, I became a lawyer in this area because I genuinely want to help people.
That was my next question.
I'm not one of those people that I'm counting how much money I make. If you, you know, saw the way I operated my business, you know, with it, because I genuinely really do want to make a difference like most people that's out there. So I have a passion for small and mid-sized business. And what I love to do is people come to me and they have a mess and they don't know how to clean it up, but I do. You know, so sometimes if people have a situation, I can come in and help fix it. They just don't know the steps or they don't know where to go for the resources. You know, and so a lot of times, honestly, the resource I'm sending them to is the library. You know, because they'll come and I'll say, you know, lawyers are expensive. So I send a lot of people back to the library, like to get a business plan. You know, I'll say, get the data that they can get you and put that together. You know, we were joking a little bit about ChatGPT. That is one of those things that I think ChatGPT might be able to help you with is write a business plan. But in order for it to be any good, you have to get the data from the library and upload it in, and then it could help get at least a starting draft with it. But remember, data in, data out. You may not find the right data, but if you get the data from the library that's reliable from, you know, legitimate resources, it might be able to help draft something up. There are lots of online templates for writing these plans.
Tracy, thank you so much.
You're welcome, you guys.
Okay, we're going to take a break, 10 minutes.
Are you presenting the next debate?
No, I was just here to answer questions. We'll hang around if there are more people that are on it, so I'm going to return home.
We're going to break up.
Yep.
There's no live stream, right?
We're still live streaming, but we put it on the break, so it's like we'll be back